Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, amidst the surprise announcement of a general election in April, Canada's crackdown on foreign study work visas sees the government refuse over 2 million applications. Meanwhile, talking of crossing borders in the US, the new drug of choice for smugglers will crack you up. Yes, it's illegal eggs, causing more of a stir than fentanyl at the US border. In California, a great turnout for the Khalistan Referendum enjoyed the sunshine yesterday as Gurdwara addressed the gathered crowds, and we'll show some of his speech. And here in the UK, one of the country's largest Gurdwaras is currently arguing with the UK government about being forced to remove a Khalistan plaque after a complaint from India. More on that shortly. And joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus. I hope you and our audience had a great weekend. It is Monday. We are back and excited to bring you more stories relevant to you and the community. And don't forget that we always appreciate when you like, follow, and subscribe. And of course, share the links with your friends. Let's see if we can push our numbers up this week for followers and subscribers. Once again, good morning, Angus. Back to you.
Absolutely. And James and I together, we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we'll take a look at loads of great comments at the end of the show, so do stay tuned for that. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
It appears that Canada's crackdown and reduced numbers for visas, whether that is for visitors working or for students, has seen a massive increase. And we're talking over 2 million denials this year. That is up from about 35% of all applications being denied to a staggering 50% of all submissions. And that is just in 2024 over the 2023 period. As we go into 2025, we know that the numbers are even more reduced, and there is a crackdown when it comes to people who are overstaying their visas. And of course, we also have a big flood of people that are extending their visas or actually converting their visas and now claiming asylum status when their visas run out in order to try and stay longer. This has been one of the big issues that Justin Trudeau had looked at when it came to the problem of uncontrolled migration and immigration into Canada. It is a big issue when you look at the pressures on the housing industry as well as other infrastructure in the country. But the cost of living has also been another problem when it comes to the students and the workers. Unfortunately, like with many other countries, Canada has seen an increase in the number of employees who are coming in from overseas on the work visa programs and temporary worker programs. We've seen a rise of complaints in terms of the mistreatment and the exploitation of those workers. So again, Canada wants to ensure that the integrity of the program is kept, but also that all persons coming into Canada have the resources to make sure their stay is pleasant and that it is not being exploited. We know that according to Canada's Immigration and Refugee and Citizenship Board, they have rejected 2.36 million temporary residence applications in 2024. This, as I said, marks the highest refusal rate since the COVID-19 pandemic of 2019, and it jumps 15% over 2023. As I stated, it is a massive jump in terms of the refusals. As I said, it's the visitor visas, the work visas, and student or study visas, so it's all of them. And here are some numbers on the screen in terms of the breakdown. 290.3 thousand international student hopefuls, or 52%, faced rejection compared to 38%, and also a 14% rise in applications. So it's been a big jump. And then with work permits, the 115,000 or just over that, applications, 22% were denied, a slight difference from 23% in 2023. So again, it is a big jump in terms of study visas, travel visas, and of course this is an ongoing issue. And when it comes to India, of course, we know that a lot of Indian agents for the RSS, for RAW, and other nefarious groups have been using the student visa program in order to obtain access. We've seen that with the individuals who are currently being held pending trial for the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada, that they also were allegedly students in the country. However, there is a lot of question about whether they were actually studying or even enrolled in programs in Canada. So it is, part of the overall framework of the overhaul of the system, and we'll have to see how that plays out over the long term with the new change in government. Being that there has been a snap election called in Canada, we now are expecting an election to happen on April the 28th, so just over a month away. And in Canada, traditionally, we don't have a big turnaround for elections. We have a very short window for the campaign, so that helps to get things moving. Ironically, the Conservatives, well, they were screaming for an election to be called, and now that there's one called, they are screaming that it's happening so quickly. So you just can't please everybody. But again, it is a part of the problem. With this moving on, though, apart from the arguments between government parties as to how the problems should be addressed in terms of immigration and temporary residency, we have to take a look at the fact that there have also been a large increase in the number of fraudulent documents being used to enter into Canada and to apply for those visas. So it's good to see also that there's been a crackdown in investigating and actually, critiquing all of these applications along with the supporting documents, Angus. It is something I'm sure that you see in the UK as well when it comes to fraudulent documents for people to try and get into the nation. But again, it's also been other issues such as the crunch on housing and the rising cost of living.
Yes, indeed. I think immigration, as I said on several occasions, it really is the hot political potato of the 21st century, the global political potato, I would say. It's this one issue that is affecting so many Western nations, and Canada is no exception. And it has actually become one of the key issues that all political battlegrounds are being fought, whether it's the US, Canada, and certainly here in the UK. It has become that one issue which even the left wing, usually the traditionally pro-immigration parties, are having to actually finally take a bit of a stand against it, because they realise that the majority of the population of these countries are saying, look, enough is enough. You cannot just have open borders. You cannot just swing open the doors and let anybody in, because that effectively certainly has been happening across Europe and North America. That's one of the reasons, the prime reasons, Donald Trump swept to power in the United States, for this very same reason. Of course, it's no surprise that even Justin Trudeau, James, I think not that long ago, himself admitted we have to reduce immigration. Again, totally against the flow of his normal political posturing. So yeah, it has become this big issue. So it's not surprising that the numbers now are significantly down. And I think this is certainly something that the Conservatives in Canada are really leveraging. I mean, Poilievre has very traditionally, I think, been very anti-immigration, and he's using this political potato as one of his key battlegrounds. Now, interestingly, Mark Carney, now the Prime Minister, it's not surprising, as you've said, James, that he's called the general election. They were so behind in the polls not that long ago, but since Donald Trump came to power, I would call it the Donald Trump bounce. He's actually done the Liberals in Canada this enormous favour, because it's allowed them to say, look what Donald Trump's done. You need us back. You need to keep us in power, because we're standing up so powerfully against Donald Trump. And clearly Mark Carney is using this massive Trump bounce, this fear, and it's almost like a war. Whenever any nation goes to war, they always rally behind whatever government is in place at the time. It doesn't matter how unpopular the government is. It's just one of those weird political facts of life that if a government goes to war or sees an enemy of the nation, that nation tends to unite behind whoever happens to be the leader at the time. And that's basically what's happening at the moment. Mark Carney's recognised this, is that this common enemy of Canada is Donald Trump, after his bizarre posturing. I have to say, it still baffles me, but this bizarre posturing to make Canada the US's 51st state. Of course, Canada is rallying around, it's uniting behind the current leader, which just happens to be Mark Carney. And that's why I think the Liberals are now are neck and neck, or maybe even slightly ahead in the polls. So unsurprised he's called an election. But yeah, I think immigration is going to be a big factor in this immigration. I think Mark Carney is going to have to, I think, campaign quite heavily based on the anti-immigration message, which again sits uncomfortably traditionally with the Liberal Party. So I think it's very interesting times in politics. Things always tend to get a little bit back to front over the last couple of years, not just in Canada, but in the US and certainly here in the UK, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And I mean, a lot of people were looking at the Conservatives and how closely they really parroted a lot of the talking points of Trump. And I think that's what's really hurt them, is the frustration with the tariffs and everything else that we're seeing at this point. And now it is an about face for Pierre Poilievre that he has changed his approach to the election. He has gone basically back to roots, and it doesn't help either way or either side that Donald Trump has really distanced himself from Pierre Poilievre, saying that he's non-MAGA enough, and all of these other comments that he basically doesn't like Pierre Poilievre is what it comes down to. And he's like a good majority of Canadians, but at the same time, it's cost the Conservative Party quite substantially in terms of the numbers. But again, with an election coming up at the end of next month, it's anybody's game, because at the end of the day, we know politics is a fickle fellow, and, anything can happen between now and then. So we'll have to wait and see. But sticking with the border, Angus, there is a story that cracks me up. It appears that eggs are actually the bigger problem than fentanyl right now, crossing the Canada-US border and the southern border. Who thought that eggs would be the smuggler's item of choice? So it has become almost funny if it wasn't that we're talking about fentanyl. Instead, if we were just talking about eggs, this would be even funnier. But let's face it, I had to go to AI to get an image of chickens trying to cross the border, because I don't know why the chicken crossed the road, but this could be it. They could have been looking for U.S. citizenship as well. But don't worry, folks. It has been announced that they will be using military planes to deport any chickens without proper paperwork and documentation. And it is just one of those days, Angus, that it's funny in a way. But back to a serious point, is that there has been a drop in the amount of fentanyl going across the Canada-US border. One person who has been running people to the Canada-US border is a representative of the cartel, of the Sinaloa cartel, according to a new news report that's out. And we'll cover that probably tomorrow. But they are claiming that they have really dropped off in terms of the amount of fentanyl that they are smuggling in from China and then across borders into Canada and the U.S. And that has to do a lot with the U.S. cut down on the accessibility of border crossings, on the improvements in terms of border security, as well as the increase in the number of personnel and law enforcement that have been lining the U.S. border to try to prevent the smuggling of people and fentanyl. So for the Trump administration, they can definitely take a moment to breathe and take a bow, because it seems to be working to curb the interest by the cartel to get that fentanyl across the U.S. border. It seems to have cut down quite dramatically. So that is a definite bonus of this all. But again, with the avian flu outbreak, the egg crisis in the U.S. is probably not going to be, solved in the very near future. But there is some relief coming in that certain countries have decided that they will start exporting eggs to the U.S. in the tens of millions. And we're talking like tens of tons of eggs coming across from places such as South Korea and other nations that are able to help. Now, we know that with the big ask that Donald Trump sent out, there were countries in Europe and elsewhere that had to turn down the request for the importation of eggs to the U.S. for the simple fact that the avian flu has reached across international borders. It's not an isolated incident in the U.S., although it seems to hit the U.S. much harder. A big part of that is the size of the egg farms in the United States. You have typically, for example, in Canada, you may have tens of thousands of birds in one egg farm, and they are more what we would classify as like a mom and pop farm instead of the industrial size farms that you see in the US with millions of birds. So of course, when you have a much smaller grouping of birds, you're able to isolate and to cull the birds that are infected with the bird flu or the entire flock without losing hundreds of millions of chickens or roosters in the same go. So it is a big challenge, but again, relief is on the way for the US when it comes to eggs. And unfortunately, of course, that will mean that demand will once again change, and we'll probably see less people strapping egg powder to their bodies to get across the border and smuggle it through the flights. And finally, I just wonder if, like fentanyl and other drugs, when they fill the plastic baggies and swallow them, if they take the shells out first, Angus, or if they leave them in the shells to try to get them into the US without breaking them. And yeah, it is, double laid eggs, I guess.
Well, I have to congratulate you, James, on an excellent story. Exceptional. Enough of those ridiculous egg puns. But yeah, it does. But it does. I mean, of course, there is a serious side to this whole story. And yeah, we do laugh about eggs. But of course, the real story here is this fentanyl thing. And this is actually one of the areas that Donald Trump has really pushed so aggressively. And actually, this is one of the root causes of these global tariffs, which is imposing on particularly countries like Canada and Mexico. But of course, India is one of the key targets. Ironically, bear in mind sort of the discussions we've had about India and the US relations, trying to sort of align and improve and build sort of commercial bridges. But actually, one of the key concerns in the United States is, of course, this illegal importation of these precursor drugs to fentanyl, and a lot of these are coming from India. And but they are channeled through primarily Mexico through the cartels, and these drugs originate from the Indian pharmaceutical companies. And again, James, we've talked in the past about India, big pharma, who are manufacturing all sorts of drugs, these opioids, whether it's the precursors or whether it's the finished products that they're shipping to West Africa. They're destroying and undermining a lot of West African society through, again, illegal importation or export from India, importing into West Africa these opioids, which are causing so much social damage in West Africa. But they're also exporting these precursor drugs to Mexico, where they're in Mexico being turned into the end product fentanyl, and then illegally shipped across into the US. So it's a global supply chain. It is this global logistical infrastructure that is tried and tested. It's been in place for many years, and it has poured these dreadful opioid drugs into the US, and it has caused so much damage to US society. And Donald Trump has said, look, we have to stop this. Now, in reality, it's a little bit like the cocaine trade, and which, of course, is, again, global. If you're stopping the importation at the border, yeah, but how much of that are you actually stopping? Probably it's a drop in the ocean. But then he's trying to target the sources, and this maybe is the only way that you are ever going to reduce the prevalence of drugs in your nation, is to try and get back to the actual root cause, the source of where it's coming from. And if it is in India, in this case for fentanyl, then his tariffs are designed to try and prevent, at least send the message to India saying you've got to stop this, otherwise we will hammer you commercially. Of course, that is in the context of all the other areas that Donald Trump is desperately trying to build bridges with India about. But ultimately, the fentanyl issue has become such a big issue, particularly in the United States, and he's desperate to do something about it. And clearly, that desperate, he is willing to resort to desperate measures, which include these tariffs, which he's being torn down about. And of course, you have to say to people who are criticising him, saying, look, tariffs are such a controversial subject. It's very questionable how effective they are, but ultimately he's got to do something about it. And everything they've tried so far has failed. And this, whether you look at Ukraine, whether you look at tariffs or whatever, he's trying different things. Middle East, the Israeli, the Gaza issue. We've tried all these methods for years, and none of them have worked. So why keep on trying the same methods? Again, it's the definition of madness. You keep trying the same thing and expecting a different result. You're mad. It's not going to happen. So Donald Trump, at least one of his selling points is he's trying something different. He's trying something different to what hasn't worked before. He's trying something different in the hope that this just might work. And I think the whole fentanyl, his targeting his methods with fentanyl, it just might work, James. Let's hope. Whether it will stop illegal egg importation, who knows, James, but we will see.
Absolutely, Angus. And on that note, I mean, the U.S., this is a rare opportunity where we get to talk about fentanyl and border crossings and smuggling with a bit of a lighthearted joke to it. And it's, and it is a very serious subject, though, and a very serious issue, as is the egg crisis, because you look at the amount and the volume of products that need the eggs to be manufactured, whether it's bread or other baked goods, or just so much of the ingredients in American cooking revolve around the eggs, and internationally, of course. So to show the amount or the seriousness of this issue, the U.S. has actually committed $1 billion to things such as the dealing with the bird flu, dealing with immunizations and research and other things. So they are doing a lot more than just reaching out to other nations to try and import eggs, but also looking at a very serious approach in dealing with the crisis in terms of the bird flu as well. Because let's face it, hundreds of millions of the birds being killed off is not beneficial to any economy, especially the farmers who are already struggling to make ends meet in the US and around the world, Angus.
Indeed, yeah, bird flu has become a massive issue, particularly here in the UK. We've seen just massive flocks of these birds just having to be culled just to try and prevent the spread of bird flu. So, yeah, nasty business. Right, James, let's move on as time marches on. I'm going to move across to a story that's actually been bubbling away for a few years here in the UK. And it's, on the face of it, it's a bit of almost a fairly sort of small issue. In fact, it implies much bigger issues. It's like many of these sort of stories, they on the face of it, they don't mean an awful lot to the wider community, but in fact the implications politically are actually very significant. And it's a story of a plaque, of all things, a Khalistan plaque in a Gurdwara, in one of our largest Gurdwaras here in the UK, in Slough. Now, in the Sri Guru Singh Sabha in Slough, the Charity Commission, that's one of our UK government organisations that oversees our charities here in the UK, the Charity Commission has been accused of interfering and unfairly targeting this Gurdwara in Slough, but it came after an Indian journalist who visited the Gurdwara back in 2019 made a complaint. Now, that's the sort of the story in a nutshell. But basically, you dig deeper into the story. It brings up a lot of very familiar issues, particularly political issues that we've suffered, and the community here in the UK have suffered. Now, in the run-up to the December 2019 general election here in the UK, a UK-based Indian journalist, Lavina Tandon, who works for India Today, visited the Sri Guru Singh Sabha and questioned. She saw this plaque, this Khalistan plaque, and said, "Why is it here?" And then made a complaint to the Charity Commission, saying this Khalistan plaque should not be allowed to be displayed in the Gurdwara. Now, this plaque has actually been on display in this Gurdwara for over 40 years. There hasn't been one single objection or complaint from anybody, whether from the Sikh community or outside the Sikh community. However, you dig a little bit deeper, this journalist was visiting as part of the BJP Indian government's policy in that British general election in 2019 of targeting certain British MPs. It just so happens the local MP for that Slough constituency, where the Gurdwara is, happened to be a Labour Sikh MP at the time. That was Tamnajit Singh Desai, who is still actually, he was in fact the first turban Sikh here in the UK and still remains a Sikh MP. But so after that visit, the journalist made a complaint to the Charity Commission. And that complaint has been basically running for 5 years, and there's been arguing backwards and forwards where the Charity Commission insisted that the plaque be removed. And of course the Gurdwara committee said, no, why should it be? Now, the Commission gave the trustees of the Gurdwara an ultimatum to remove it by the 10th of March. That was just over a couple of weeks ago, stating that failing to comply would be considered misconduct and or mismanagement. So the Sikh Federation UK, they got involved in this on a fairly early time to stand on behalf of the Gurdwara. They wrote to the Charity Commission. There's been a lot of backwards and forwards over the last 5 years about it. But what they did, they wrote a letter earlier this year, and they said, look, they wrote it to Labour MPs, to the government, and said, it appears the Conservatives, that was the government that came into power in 2019, so they were the government at the time, the Conservative Party, they used the Home Office team, who oversee the Charity Commission, to get the Charity Commission to inappropriately target certain Gurdwaras. In one case that's been ongoing for 5 years, the Charity Commission acted on a complaint by the Indian journalist, known to be close to the Indian government, of course a link there to the Modi government, to unfairly target the Gurdwara in Slough and the local Labour Sikh MP. Now, basically, so if I just spill it out, if I summarise clearly what's going on here, the Slough Gurdwara had this Khalistan plaque. The local MP happens to be a Sikh also. The Indian BJP government knew the 2019 general election was being fought. They, of course, don't want Sikh MPs here in the UK. They don't want the Sikh community to have a voice in British politics. So the BJP government interfered deliberately by sending journalists, for example, like this journalist, to the Gurdwara to cause problems, to try and do anything they could to prevent Sikhs getting a political voice, basically to try and undermine Tam Desai as a Labour MP. So they made a complaint. They saw this Khalistan plaque. Of course, they are anti-Khalistan, vehemently anti-Khalistan. They hate the Khalistan movement, so they're trying to cause problems. So they lent on the British Conservative government at the time and said, because again, this comes back down to this relationship between the British Conservatives, the British right wing, and the Indian government, and they said, you've got to do something about this. And you're going to use the Home Office have got to do something about it. We want this Khalistan plaque removed. We want there to be a real stir, a lot of negative publicity about this Sikh MP to try and damage his chances of getting elected. And of course the Conservatives were delighted because of course this Sikh MP sits on the other side. He's a Labour MP. So of course the Conservatives were delighted to do what they could to try and damage Tam Desai's potential at that general election. So what did the Conservative government do? They used the Home Office, who in turn used the Charity Commission to target the Gurdwara. Now the Charity Commission, interestingly, let me link to another story that we've covered in depth on many occasions, a gentleman called Deepa Singh, who was sentenced recently, or his sister was sentenced to prison recently, and he himself, Deepa, was sentenced to a suspended sentence by the Charity Commission for alleged fraud. Now, the Home Office and the UK government have been targeting Deepa Singh because of his links to Jagtar Singh Johal and his massive campaigning on behalf of Jaggi and other Sikh issues. They've been targeting him on a regular basis. And lo and behold, they couldn't find anything to use against him. They accused him of terrorism, all sorts of stuff, under pressure from the Indian government. In the end, they had to go through the Charity Commission to try and uncover alleged fraud. And again, very questionable. And in the end, they managed to cobble together a very questionable legal case, which they managed to imprison Deepa's sister and to give Deepa a suspended sentence. So again, it's the British government, the Conservative government, have used the Charity Commission as this sort of proxy under pressure from India to target the Sikh community. And here again, in this case, the Charity Commission have been used again as a tool, a mechanism to try and target the local Sikh community by the British government under pressure from India. So lo and behold. Now, interestingly, the Sikh Federation on this story, they've actually, and if you remember, our regular audience will remember last week I covered the story of the National Security Act 2023, this new act brought in by the British government that will be used against foreign interference, anybody, particularly from India, who's trying to interfere in British politics or British anything to do with the British, the running of the British society, they will be charged under the National Security Act, the NSA 2023. And the Sikh Federation UK said, right, okay, under this NSA 2023, we now almost certainly regard the actions of this Indian journalist as, quote, foreign interference and should therefore be investigated with the possibility of prosecution. So the Charity Commission need to urgently review such cases in light of the National Security Act. As it appears, India is overstepping the mark once again and denying freedom of expression. So the Sikh Federation, well done to the Sikh Federation, they're turning this back on the government, saying, oh, well, okay, if you want to use a charity commission to target this Gurdwara, well, this whole complaint originated by foreign interference. So therefore, under your own rules, you should use this act, this NSA, to investigate this journalist as a foreign interferer. So well done to the National Sikh Federation for that, for turning it back on the UK government. Now, the Sikh Federation provided evidence to the Charity Commission that there are a number of other Gurdwaras in Birmingham, Derby, Leicester and London that also display the word Khalistan prominently. And certainly over the last 5 years, the Charity Commission has visited those Gurdwaras, but has raised no objection. So why are you targeting Slough? We all know why you're targeting Slough. It is because it's being unfairly targeted because, of course, the local MP happens to be a Sikh MP and you're doing it under pressure from India. So they've made that very clear. And they have made a statement, Sikh Federation have made a statement, there's been a lot of meetings between the Charity Commission and the Gurdwara Committee and various representatives to try and resolve this ridiculous issue. Because the Charity Commission are basically saying, look, I think their argument is that having a Khalistan plaque is too political. It goes against the Charity Commission's rules. The Gurdwara is run as a charity, but the Gurdwara and the Sikh organisations and representatives say, no, the Khalistan is inherently linked to our religious identity and our religious heritage. It is an essential part. It goes all the way back to the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, and it is part of the Khalsa. Khalistan is inextricably linked to the Khalsa and therefore our absolute religious identity. Therefore, you cannot ask us to remove it. It goes against our religious freedoms of expression. So that's the argument on both sides. And so the Sikh Federation said that they have had a positive meeting with the Charity Commission, who have a much better understanding of Sikh religious and theological matters and modern-day Sikh history. So basically, the Charity Commission is a little bit caught in the middle here. On one side, it is being pressured by the Home Office and the British government, Starmer's government, because they in turn are being pressured by India. But on the other side, they've got the Sikh community saying, no, this is inherently part of our religion. You cannot stop us displaying anything to do with Khalistan because that is who we are. Khalistan is what Sikhi is all about. It goes all the way back to the Khalsa. So the poor Charity Commission are caught being torn apart or being pressured by both sides. So they are trying to resolve this in the most amicable possible way, James. So essentially, James, as I said at the beginning, this story starts with a simple thing, a Khalistan plaque on display. But as I said, it explodes back up into this bigger story of, once again, it is India pressuring the British government being cowardly, cowing down to the Indian government and doing the Indian government's dirty work for it through its proxy, the Charity Commission, which has been used in the past to target the Sikh community. And on the other side, we have the Sikh community just trying to stand up for its basic, simple religious freedom of expression, which of course stands primarily and fundamentally based on Khalistan, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And I mean, I understand that there is a separation between the politics of it and the religious aspects of it. But at the same time, because this is a lot different than what the India Reporter or the Indian government would have people believe, it is about identity, as you stated. It is about a culture. It's about a rich history that was lost when the British colonized India. And it's about restoring what was rightfully theirs. As a people, as a nation, as a culture. And so, yeah, I think that it is an overreach to try and tell them that they must remove a Khalistan flag from a Gurdwara. I don't think that they really have the authority there, but it is, again, the way in which the India government has a history of trying to murky the waters of truth and to try and create distraction and really make something out of nothing. And that is a pattern we see. When it comes to the retroactive enforcement of the new NSA changes, the National Security Act, it would be a challenge maybe to go back and deal with people from 2019, but if they are still active in this fight, then definitely it makes a big difference. And under the government's own rules, they need to look at the potential for foreign interference prosecution there. And that is something that we're seeing a crackdown on in a lot of Western nations. And that is going after people involved and actively supporting foreign interference and transnational repression in foreign nations such as Canada, the US, the UK, and otherwise, Angus.
Indeed, and that NSA really came into force primarily down to a lot of lobbying and pressure from the Sikh community. So well done to the Sikh community on that. I would say that's a massive political victory. Right, James, let's move on as time marches on. And I am delighted to say that the referendum over the weekend in Los Angeles went extremely well. There was a great turnout in that Californian sunshine. Over 35,000 Sikhs participated apparently in that voting. We haven't had any official count, but the estimates at the moment are over 35,000 people turned up to cast their vote either pro or against Khalistan, but we do believe, of course, the overwhelming majority will be pro-Khalistan, judging by the number of Khalistan flags that were on display. And the community came from all over the United States to cast their votes. It did start early in the morning, 9 a.m. at the Civic Centre, and I think by all accounts the atmosphere was very positive, very enthusiastic. I was actually planning, or had planned, to talk to Dr. Singh Sandhu on location that morning in Los Angeles, but for various technical communication problems, we couldn't quite get the connection put together. So unfortunately, that we couldn't do a quick interview. But he has actually sent me a link, and there is a video. Let me show you a video. Let me play this video. Gurwara Singh Panoon did actually address the crowd, and in his usual forthright and robust manner, sent out a very clear message to the crowd. The sound on this video is not great, so apologies for the sound, but I think you get the general gist. Let me play you. This is Gurwara Singh Panoon's address to the crowd yesterday in Los Angeles.
Who has allowed this Khalistan referendum against the push of Modi's regime, because no one knows this better than the Trump administration, who also faced an assassination because of mega referendum. This is about a political opinion. Trump's shooter had the same mindset as of Modi regime's violent Hindutva ideology, that is to kill for political opinion. The Modi regime has a kill list of Khalistan referendum organizers. Sikhs for Justice has a target list of Modi, Jaishankar, Shah, Rajnath, Doval, and who will face political death. Rajnitik maut in Punjab. SIGN is fighting India's violence with votes. With the Khalistan referendum, SFJ will kill India with the most potent weapon of the century, that is the pen. Kill India! Politics! Kill Modi! Politics! We are fighting India's bullets with the ballots, and that carry the most dangerous explosive. The explosive of the votes. We are not going to kill any political leader, but Khalistan referendum to break the union of India and liberate Punjab from the Indian occupation. India is using all its trade power to label me as a terrorist, Atwadi. हाँ जी, मैं हाँ आतवादी ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੀ ਨਜ਼ਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹ ਅੱਤਵਾਦੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੋਟਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਨੂੰ ਭਾਰਤ ਦੇ ਕਬਜ਼ੇ ਚੋਂ ਆਜ਼ਾਦ ਕਰਾਏਗਾ।
हाँ मैं हूँ अतवादी जेड़ा मोदी जयशंकर शाह राजनाथ ते डोवल नू राजनीतिक मौत दा ऐलान करदा है। मैं हाँ ओह अतवादी जिस दे कोल हथियार है
कलम दा, जिस दे कोल एक्सप्लोसिव ते बंब है बैलट दा ते धमाका होएगा वोटां दा। इन्हां वोटां दे नाल पंजाब आजाद करवाना है। अगला वोटिंग है अपनी वाशिंगटन डीसी 17 अगस्त नूं ओह जगह जिथों दुनिया दी राजनीति चलदी है, ओह राजनीति जिस दे हेठ देश बनदे है, जिस दे हेठ पंजाब भारत दे कब्जे चों आजाद होवेगा। मैं अज तुहाडे अगे बेनती करनी है सिख संगत कि 10 गुरु एक गुरु ग्रंथ साहब जिथे तुसी वोटां पाउण आउंदे हो उथे तुसी जिंदगी दे उथे तुसी अपनी जिंदगी दे 11 मिनट तुसी सानू देने हैं। ओ 11 मिनट तुसी खालिस्तान दी मुहिम ते लगाने हैं, पंजाब नू भारत दे कब्जे चों आजाद कराउण लई लाउणे हैं। ओह 11 मिनट तुसी हर उस मुद्दे ते जेड़ा सिख दे लई अज दे लई दुनिया तक साडी आवाज पहुंचाएगा ओदे लई लाने हैं। ते हर एक सिख ने 5 होर सानू 11 मिनट दवाने हैं। एह अहद करो तुसी इत्थे साडे नाल अहद करो, खालिस्तान जिंदाबाद ते खालिस्तान जिंदाबाद दे नारियां दे नाल खालिस्तान जिंदाबाद, खालिस्तान जिंदाबाद, खालिस्तान जिंदाबाद। वाहेगुरु जी का खालसा, वाहेगुरु जी की फतेह।
So that was really interesting. I mean, again, it's Gurdwara Singh Panoon in his usual full flow. But what I find interesting, there was a very, very unambiguous theme to that speech, and it was all about, this is not about violence, this is about democracy. And again, a lot of his videos are deliberately a little bit slightly ambiguous, kill Modi. But if you notice in this speech, there was a lot of chanting, kill Modi politics, kill Modi politics. And it was all about ballots, not bullets. It was all about explosives of votes. And again, he's made it very, very clear now. And I wonder if he's just running slightly scared. I wonder if he's maybe pushed the envelope just a little bit too far in his rhetoric. And is gifting too much the Indian media. And now he's actually very, very clearly making it very clear he's killing Modi politics. So still using the provocative language, but again, is stressing this politics part of it, and even the chant at the end, as you heard there. But anyway, yes, so generally speaking, James, I think the atmosphere apparently was very enthusiastic, very positive, and great turnout, and fantastic. If we get any more pictures or videos from there, we'll certainly let our audience see them in future shows.
Absolutely. And again, if any of our viewers out there have coverage and images, please feel free to share. You know how to find us on email, and Angus will cover that at the end as usual, but you can also just send it through on YouTube or other sources as well. Send us the links. But when it comes to his speech, yeah, I noticed the same thing as you, Angus, in terms of the kill Modi politics. Very clear there, but with a certain vigor, a certain energy that we usually see accompany Mr. Panoon's speeches, as well as the rallies and events leading up to the Khalistan Referendum. Now, some people may look at this and say, well, how come California only had 35,000 votes this turnout? But let's not forget that this is a state that has held several referendum votes in various cities, such as Sacramento. So it is about regional. It's not even just that one polling station would represent the entire state. So again, I think that people have to reference that as well. And when you take into account the totality of total people that have cast their votes and really had their voices heard in California, it is, probably over 100,000 easily. So again, it is a bit misleading when people think, oh, the vote happened in California, only 35,000 people. But no, in just Los Angeles, in that main area, over 35,000 in this vote. And again, a lot of people had previously voted in the other areas as well, Angus. So it is a huge turnout. It hopefully was a sunny day. It looks from the video it was. But then again, Southern California, what else would we expect? And yeah, I would have been, I probably would have been in shorts in a lounge chair on the beach and then had to run up and cover this. But it is a little spread out. So maybe I would have actually just focused on the referendum. I hope that other people outside of the Sikh community did take the opportunity to go down and actually speak with the community, learn more about the referendum, learn more about Sikhi and the people, their cultures, and of course just really take that opportunity to feel the energy and the excitement of this democratic process. And at the end of the day, Angus, that's what it's about. It's about democracy. It's about respecting people's opinions, and whether they voted yes or no in the referendum, just the fact that they have the opportunity to share their voice, Angus.
Absolutely, and it was announced actually yesterday that the next referendum will be held on August the 17th in Washington DC. So the referendum train marches or rolls forward to Washington in 5 months' time for the next iteration, and it will be interesting actually to see as the referendum draws to a close. And I don't know when that will be, but it will be interesting to see what the final numbers of votes casted throughout all the combined referenda, and because I have no doubt that the turnout will be absolutely enormous globally when they're all totted up. So we shall see. Right, James, let's move on to our comments section, and loads of comments that have poured in after our video. So thank you, as always, to our wonderful audience who contribute so much to the show. We'll start the show off today with a comment from Pavik. And this comment was, the truth cannot be suppressed by time. Yes, absolutely. And I think this is actually just a basic phrase which really just sums up so much of what we talk about. And I think this reference back to the truth that's come out about the Chichen massacre, it turns out likely perpetrated by the Indian government. And I think Pavik's comment is absolutely right. It doesn't matter how, whatever time passes, the truth always manages to come out in the end. There's always some way it filters out in the end. And I think, as we've seen with the Chichen massacre, James, the truth is slowly filtering out, and it's usually quite shocking when it does.
It does, and let's face it, it's not what you typically see in the history lessons in the classroom. It's not what you see in the documentaries on the Discovery Channel. It is about the community, making sure their voices are heard to speak up about their history, about the atrocities, about all of these different issues that have impacted where the Sikh community is today, and all communities for that matter. So again, it's about learning from the past, but in order to do so, we've got to have people with a voice who were there and or pass down stories generationally. So again, it's the truth never is suppressed forever. It always finds a way to come out, and for that, I have a deep respect for the Sikh community to continue making sure their voices and their truth is heard.
Indeed, and humanity follows this up with the basic truth that the world is finally getting to know the real India, and it basically doesn't look good for India. Well, the India's done its level best to try and suppress as much of this nasty truth as they can from reaching the global audience. They can control their own press. They certainly can control what their own domestic audience see and hear, but they can't control the global media because, of course, we here in the democratic West, we do have freedom of expression. So when the truth is announced and when the truth does filter out, people are finding out what the real India really does represent, the current Indian government represents, and it isn't pretty, James.
Yeah, and when you look at the media worldwide, I mean, a lot of the hatred and the distrust for the mainstream media is there. But you also have to keep in mind that governments like India are also going to feed into that through their use of social media and other media outlets to try and bring into disrepute a lot of, or ill repute the reputation of a lot of media that is working to bring the truth, independent journalists and so forth. So again, it's about really being aware of what you're reading, what you're watching, and what the source is, Angus.
And let me check. Says look, we knew it, but the problem was that Khazadari Hindus were blaming Pakistan, and those sheep are the main problem in Sikh freedom. And they're saying, and I had to look at what a Khazadari Hindu is, James, for our own education, and maybe some in our audience who doesn't know what a Khazadari Hindu is. It means literally Hindus with long hair. It's a term used and promoted by the RSS, as it turns out. So let me check. Is blaming the Khazadari Hindus, who in turn were blaming the Pakistan, this perennial bogeyman of India is Pakistan. It's a fairly common accusation against Pakistan for support of the Khalistan movement, etc. And it's, well, again, we throw that argument out on a regular basis. But Kings of America also follows up by saying, look, Sikhs have been suspicious of this Hindu regime for a long time. I think that, Kings of America, is probably the understatement of the year. I think the Sikhs have been suspicious of this, this particular Hindu regime probably since it ever came in, but certainly suspicious of the Hindu governments, certainly since 1947. I think that's probably more realistic, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's face facts that we have been bringing this up on our show for, and our various videos for several years. But this is, as they say, it's going back to 1947 and even beyond that. So yeah, it is a long-stemming problem, and there's been distrust on both sides, and it definitely has been heightened by the government of India, the BJP, the RSS, RA, and the Hindutva extremists. So again, you're not looking at the everyday typical Hindu person. You're looking at the extremists and all these other organizations that have really, given the Sikhs reason to be distrustful. And part of that's the caste system and the Brahmins. And, we could go on for days about the different influences there, Angus.
Yeah, and I think that is an important distinction, is that we are not anti-Hindu, quite the opposite. We're very pro-Hindu. It is these extremists who sit at that extreme right-wing end, the RSS extremists, they're nationalist extremists, who are using and manipulating the rest of the Hindu population to do their dirty work for them. So that's an important distinction. We had a long comment from Free Spirit about a few issues, but it was actually in response to one of our regular commenters who sits on the other side of the narrative, Danny. And of course, we do quote Danny quite often. And Free Spirit has taken Danny to task on a few issues. But one of them, particularly recently, was this murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who generally is being blamed on the Indian government. And Danny says, was it really? Where's your proof? Well, Free Spirit says, look, come on. It's pretty obvious. While technically there may not be a smoking gun found, as you say, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, well, clearly it is a duck. And another phrase that you quote is, where there's smoke, there is fire. And clearly there's enough smoke around that Canada, for example, expelled several senior Indian diplomats over the murder of Nijjar. And the smoke, again, you refer to Vikas Yadav, who was outed by the Indian government itself in the potential murder or the assassination plot over Panoon. Likewise, photographs of Nijjar slumped over his steering wheel after he was murdered was shared by Vikas Yadav and with Nikhil Gupta, currently being held in jail in the US. So, yeah, in other words, clearly the murder of Nijjar, and ultimately, yes, you are innocent until proved guilty, but at the moment, the evidence in the public domain certainly stacks up against the Indian government that they were behind this. And then the other topic that we have been talking about on a regular basis are these protests outside the Mandir. And as you rightly say, Free Spirit, it wasn't a protest against our Hindu brothers. And again, I'm glad you put that, our Hindu brothers. because we're not targeting Hindus, we're very pro-Hindu as much as we're pro-Sikh. It wasn't targeted against our Hindu brothers and sisters, it was a protest against the Mandir, who were effectively hiding raw agents under diplomatic passports. And again, we highlight that on a regular basis, that protest wasn't against, obviously, anything. It wasn't against the Mandir itself, it was against what the Mandir was protecting within its walls. And then the final point here, James, is Danny was slightly sarcastic about a turban guy. Why would we let a turban guy lead our country? Well, as Free Spirit Riley points out, look, mate, more than 90% of the sacrifices of imprisonments and hangings to free India from the British Empire and the British rule were made by these so-called turban guys. And this is a really important, James, is that the Sikh community have disproportionately contributed to what India is today than any other minority or any other even majority in India. It's the Sikhs who actually stood at that forefront against the British Empire. It was the Sikhs who disproportionately suffered and sacrificed so much to free India as it is today from British rule. So it's unfair of anybody to try and target these turban guys, as I think Danny quoted them as, James.
Absolutely, and let's also keep in mind the amazing sacrifices that the Sikh community has put forward to in the losses of life and many other things to protect not only through various world wars, but also stood shoulder to shoulder with foreign nations such as Canada, the U.S., Britain, and so forth, to protect our homelands, to protect our freedoms, our rights. And this, again, you emphasize so much on what they gave up in the colonies when it was under British rule in India, that, you can't put that aside. You can't turn a blind eye to that. But what even further brings the importance of this is how much they were deceived. The Sikh people were deceived, and they were shortchanged when it came to what they were promised by the Hindu-led government of the day and the negotiations, and what they actually received after the partition took place, Angus.
Indeed, how quickly India forgets the contribution of the Sikhs that made India what it is today. Final set of comments. Khalistan Referendum says there should be a referendum day once a year under the name of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Well, I don't quite know what we'd have a referendum about once a year, but certainly I think that the thought is absolutely right, James.
Well, we could have referendums on whether we want our US-bound eggs scrambled or fried, but other than that, this is a question to have. What eggs do we want when we're sitting at the cafe in Khalistan, Angus?
Well, James, apparently a member of our audience thinks we're speaking fluent Punjabi now. It's Harjeet Rosha. Says, greetings. Well, greetings to you, Harjeet Rosha. And after listening to us both for so long, it appears that you both are speaking Punjabi. Feels so nice to have a Canadian and a Britisher speaking Punjabi. You always make my day. Well, Harjeet Rosha, your comments make our day. And hopefully our Punjabi has become quite fluent. At least you can imagine it is.
It's probably better than my French.
And Deep Singh says LA will set new records in vote casting in favour of the Khalistan nation. And we're giving very deep information about India's transnational oppression. Great job. Well, a pleasure. Well, thank you for that. And I think, as James said, I think once these votes are totted up, and certainly the turnout in California, if we do include Sacramento and the other ones, the turnout has been absolutely massive. And I think there is no doubt, James, that those votes will, throughout the whole referendum, be cast in favour of Khalistan by a massive majority.
That's right, yeah. And there's such a big population in California that they have that ability to have more than one referendum throughout the state in order to maximize the impact and the ability to people to have their voices heard, Angus.
And Deep Singh finishes off his comment by offering us lunch on that beautiful sunny day in the Republic of Khalistan. Well, as James and I say, yeah, indeed, the day that Khalistan gets its independence, we will both be there, God willing. And if you're willing to buy us lunch, well, let's all sit around the massive table. We'll invite all our audience. If you're there, come and join us for that lunch. And I'm sure that day will be a fabulous day, James.
Absolutely, and let's face it, this fat guy never turns down free food.
Well, I'll guarantee it will be the party to end all parties, and God willing, we will all be there on that glorious day to celebrate the establishment of Khalistan. But on that note, we must end Perspectives for another day. But please don't forget to keep these comments coming in. Thanks always for all the comments that you have been contributing. Really fascinating. Do let us know things that you'd like to bring to our attention. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satlowstv.com if there's anything you'd like to send us directly and not put in the public domain. But that is it for another day. Thanks so much for staying loyal. Thanks for watching us once again. But in the meantime, that is it from us. It's a goodbye from me. Goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.